Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Christina Delicio, and I am an Economic Development Specialist in the Community Development Department. This is the Energy Efficiency and Packaging webinar hosted by the Economic Opportunity and Development Division. The division is housed in the Cambridge Community Development Department, otherwise known as CDD, and is committed to building an inclusive and sustainable economy in the city of Cambridge. The division is responsible for a wide range of activities designed to meet the city's need for a vibrant, innovative, diverse, and thriving economic base that ensures economic opportunity for all. To learn more about the division, you can visit cambridgema.gov/CDD/economic opportunity and development. This webinar is part of many wider efforts. First, this webinar is part of a Green Restaurants mini-series hosted by our friends at Prepshift. And second, the Green Restaurant series is part of our Food Business Incubator Workshop program, which is available through our division. If by chance you missed the first workshop in the Green Restaurants mini-series, you can view a recording of it on our division's website, and you can contact me directly. I've got my email address right here under my little screen. And before we fully kick it off, just a couple of tiny things. This webinar is being recorded, so we will have it available for folks later. And if by chance folks need to, they can use the chat. They can also use the Q&A feature. And a copy of our presentation slides will be available later on. So let's get started. It is my absolute pleasure to have Irene Lee here today of Prepshift. I've had the immense joy of being able to work with Irene in the past, and every time it's always a delight. Prepshift was started because Irene and her team saw that restaurants were not getting the help that they needed, especially the ones that really needed it. And Prepshift now offers workforce training, coaching, consulting, and workshops. So certainly tell all your friends. I'll now turn it over to Irene to more fully introduce herself and to fully get us started.
Hey, Christina, thank you so much. So today we are talking all about energy efficiency and green packaging for restaurants. We're so happy to be guests of the City of Cambridge's Community Development Department. We love Cambridge. We love Cambridge restaurants. And so this is really a treat for us. As Christina said, Prepshift is a tech-enabled restaurant consultancy, and that's a lot of big words, but essentially what that means is we help independent restaurants and their teams get on the same page so that they can build sustainable businesses that empower them to accomplish what they want to accomplish, and not to always feel like they're working for the business, but rather on it and to grow it. Our team is comprised of a grand total of 3. So myself, I operated a business in the city of Boston for 11 years, and that is still in operation in South Boston with my 2 partners. And I'm also the CEO of Prepshift. My colleague Dylan Gully, who has a background in restaurant consulting and is also our numbers and finance guy. And Carla Cornejo, who has an operations and people background. She's worked in tech, she's worked in restaurants, and having worked with her at May, I know personally that there is nothing she can't do. So together, we try to support independent restaurants to meet their goals, to take good care of their teams and their communities. Today, we are talking about sustainability because the restaurant industry is a huge contributor to environmental problems and climate change. The good news is that means we can actually have a lot of positive impact on the fight against climate change. And there's pressure coming at us, of course, from all directions. Our guests want us to be more green, there are government mandates. We have so many bills to pay and everything is getting more expensive. And a lot of the time, our employees, our internal teams are pushing us. They're asking us why we can or can't do this or that green initiative. And of course, I think we all would like to be more sustainable in our business practices. But maybe you don't know exactly how, and that is why we are here today. We like to use this framework when we talk about greening your business called the triple bottom line. And in a lot of businesses, and maybe in your business right now, the only bottom line that matters is profit. Because if you can't survive as a business, you cannot have positive impact on the environment or on people. But we believe that profitable businesses can and should be good for people and the planet, and those goals can even support one another. So we're here to talk about how you don't have to sacrifice profitability for sustainability or vice versa. We think that the businesses that figure out how to prioritize people, profit, and planet are actually the ones that are going to survive this very difficult period in our economy. Our goal with this series is to provide tangible, achievable steps that you can take in your business, not only to save you money, but to have a positive impact as well. And we are very excited to provide a number of resources and tips and tricks to help you continue to evolve your business in this way. Our goal for today is to help you pollute less in a way that also saves you money. So again, that's that two bottom lines acting as one. Energy use and plastic packaging, while they may not seem related, are both essentially forms of pollution. And so we want to help you save money, pollute less, and improve your bottom line. We're going to go through just a couple of general energy tips and then start talking about how you can evaluate and improve your energy usage. Then we'll transition over to packaging and then wrap up, and we welcome your questions all the way through our presentation as well. So energy efficiency, we're going to start by just looking at where we actually use energy in restaurants before we think about how we want to reduce our energy usage. We want everyone to know that we're going to draw a lot on the EPA during this conversation, and Energy Star, which is a program of the EPA, which is part of the federal government. So most of this material in here, it's free, it's online, and there are lots of resources. Now, looking at this chart, according to Energy Star, restaurants use 5 to 7 times more energy per square foot than other commercial buildings. So like we said, restaurants are a big contributor to energy use and climate change. And then when we break it down, I think this is pretty interesting that food preparation and all of the equipment that's associated with that, as well as HVAC, which, as you probably know, stands for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. Those are the big culprits in a restaurant. And lighting, sanitation, and refrigeration are also notable chunks of this pie. But we are definitely going to be talking a lot about HVAC and other kind of high impact ways and high impact changes that you can make. So one of the tips that we wanted to introduce, especially because we know that in a restaurant, you have to replace equipment all the time. One thing to consider is buying Energy Star certified appliances. These are appliances that are designed to use less energy, and they often come with rebates and discounts. And so you can see an example here of a steam cooker that is Energy Star certified. According to EPA, a certified steamer can save you up to $1,200 in gas or electricity annually. And up to 12,000 models over the product lifetime. It also uses less water, and so you save on water and sewer costs as well. And so here's basically how we want to make sure we all keep in mind that buying an Energy Star appliance is not just about something that makes you feel good and is good for the environment. In the long term, it does save you money and can pay for itself. So this is just one example. Another tip is about maintaining your refrigeration. As we saw from that pie chart, refrigeration is a sizable chunk of energy use in restaurants. And so we recommend being really proactive about installing curtains, door sweeps to make sure that that cold air isn't escaping, and to regularly clean and maintain elements of your walk-in or your reach-in refrigerators. These are things that you can teach yourself how to do by looking online, and or you can contract a company to come in and maintain your refrigeration as well. One of my favorite topics, which is kind of old news for a lot of folks in energy efficiency, but in many restaurants has not yet been addressed, is light bulbs. So replacing traditional bulbs with LEDs, they cost a little bit more, but they use so much less energy and they last longer. You can tell by this chart that the total savings from an LED bulb compared to an incandescent is really significant. So even if an incandescent bulb costs a little bit more, even if an LED bulb costs a little bit more, you are going to save a ton of money. And actually, one anecdote that I love is that at our old Maymay location on 506 Park Drive, we had some LED filament lights that kind of, they look sort of old school and antique-y, but they are LEDs. And in 10 years, we never changed them. And so I actually have a box full of LEDs that we've never used because they were so efficient at Maymay. Next, a tip that I think we've all probably read about in the news lately is about gas stoves versus electric. So gas stoves, as we've all been learning, are better for air quality and for human health as a result. And there are a lot of places where gas is kind of going out of style and even being banned. The other great thing about induction cooktops or electric cooktops is that often they're more flexible in your physical space. So they can either be portable or they can just be kind of more modular so that you can move them around. If you don't have a gas line hard plumbed into your stove, that makes it a lot easier, not just to move your stove around if you need to, but also to clean and do maintenance. So at our new Maymay location, again, we are fully electric, and that has been an amazing improvement for all of our team. Cleaning around electric equipment is so much better than dealing with gas equipment that doesn't move. And programmable controls are increasingly available for businesses. You've probably seen a programmable thermostat before. And if you don't have one or you have a really old one, you can often find money to help you upgrade. And there are even ways to program things like your vent, your kitchen ventilation system, and those can automatically adjust the temperature, the fan speed when the temperature is low enough that you don't need the hood on. These are really, really kind of smart pieces of technology that I think we all should be using. And because HVAC is such a huge portion of our energy expense, for a lot of people, this is a great place to start. We also want to think about water usage because we do pay for water, and there are a lot of kind of, again, small water saving practices. So switching in a low flow faucet or toilet if you are making a replacement, using spray nozzles and even kind of these WaterSense approved spray nozzles. Again, you can see these do make a difference in terms of your water and sewer costs. And one important note is if you are able to use less hot water, you are also saving on gas or electric, whatever you're using to get that hot water that you need for hand washing and dishwashing. And then one thing that I think, this is so obvious, but repairing leaks is so important. It is really easy to see a leak and to think, oh, that's just, a drop of water every 30 seconds. But when you add something that up, it can be incredibly expensive. And so repairing leaks promptly is very, very important. Back to HVAC, making sure that your system is properly maintained and being proactive, again, about bringing in your HVAC contractor to look at everything is really valuable. I think at Maymay, I always remember that our air conditioning went out about once per summer and our heat went out about twice per winter. And so when we started bringing people in on a maintenance schedule, that was a huge benefit to us, and we were able to avoid closing or making other drastic changes to our schedule. Preventative maintenance, again, this applies to all of your equipment, but especially the things that can really get you in trouble if they fail. So, of course, if you don't have hot water, you can't be operating your restaurant safely. And so making sure that your water heater, your HVAC, all of those really necessary items are something that you're keeping track of. That matters. Here in Boston, of course, we have winter. And so window treatments to prevent wind and drafts can make a big difference in your heating bill. And even having curtains so that the sun is limited from entering the space. Of course, we all love to have big windows in our space, but we do get that greenhouse effect where it can become very, very warm. One thing to keep in mind is that you don't want to run afoul of any fire code. And so before you do any treatments for your windows, especially curtains, things that can impact egress, it makes sense to reach out to your local inspector or to your fire department to make sure that you are preserving, all of the safety of your guests in addition to addressing your costs. And you probably hear a lot about renewable energy. So that is essentially using solar or wind power to generate electricity rather than coal. We're going to talk about this in a lot more detail later. There's some great resources out there, but wanted to just put this forward as kind of a quick tip when we think about energy efficiency. So let's move into kind of what are some of the first things that you can do to get started with energy efficiency? And then we'll pause for questions after that. But if there are any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. One program that you may already know about is Cambridge Community Choice Electricity. Community Choice Electricity is also known as CCE, and this is a type of program that is increasingly popular in cities and towns. So if you are a resident or a small business in Cambridge, it is very likely that you have already been opted in to this program, which is great. The program essentially, it allows Cambridge customers to opt in to a more affordable offering for electricity. And if you are interested, even a more affordable and green option for electricity. And so when you go on to the website or you call Eversource or you call the city of Cambridge, you can get a sense of how much you might be able to save and what sort of options are available to you. The really amazing thing is that these CCE rates are typically cheaper than Eversource. The prices do change, but these, in this case, you can see Eversource costs 26 cents per kilowatt hour, which is more than double what CCE in Cambridge provides. This is also a more green option than what Eversource provides. And then finally, one of the things I think is really great here is that you can choose a 100% renewable energy option and still be saving a boatload of money. So the next time you look at your Eversource bill, take a moment to find out what rate you are paying. And if you are paying the full Eversource rate, you definitely want to opt away from that. But you might even consider whether you want to be using a fully green option or if you want to stick with whatever you have been automatically enrolled for. Just to kind of illustrate what this looks like, as you can see in this chart, this red line is what Eversource has been charging for a sample residential customer. And you can see that between 2017 and 2023, prices have gone way, way up per kilowatt hour. So by contrast, this green line down at the bottom is the CCE price. And so this is just a household that is saving now $60 a month. But if you are like most restaurants, you are using a lot more power than this. And so your savings are going to be many, many times this amount. We recently were with a customer in Boston who had not yet opted in to Boston's CCE, and we were able to get them all set up, and we think that they are going to save about between $700 and $900 a month, which is huge, and it's just filling out one form online. And so definitely double check to see if you have already been put into this program. And if not, there is no time to waste. It is almost air conditioning season. So definitely reach out to find out about CCE. All right, now when we talk about energy efficiency, it's important to determine what your benchmark energy use is. This is essentially the before in the before and after. So to understand how much you've improved, you have to know where you started. So we recommend collecting about 12 months of usage data for water, gas, and electricity. Thankfully, Eversource and National Grid have online portals that can make this very easy information to gather. If you are like May, you might have a water meter that your landlord controls. And so you may need to reach out to get access to this meter or to get reports. But this is how we basically know if we have made improvements. And with any initiative, I know that for me, I always am motivated when I can see improvement. And so even if you're thinking, well, I'll just use less water and feel good about it, I would urge you to make sure that you have your benchmark so that you can measure where you've been and where you're going. Then after you've got your benchmarks ready, we recommend taking a look at the Energy Star Treasure Map. Again, this is from the federal government, and it's a 7-page PDF that covers a bunch of different, basically like checklist items to look at in your business to see if there are improvements that you can make. Because every business is different, not all of these may apply to you, but this is something that you can get your managers or even your whole team involved in, looking at the restaurant and looking for opportunities to save. You can also connect with Mass Save for an energy audit. Mass Save is basically a consortium of all of the energy providers in the state. And they can connect you with a rep from your utility company to help look around your restaurant and look for opportunities. They recommend improvements for you, and they also will let you know what rebates are available. And we do just recommend taking this with a little grain of salt, because the folks who do these audits, typically they do work for the utility. And so it is in their interest to have you participate in these programs. So if you have any doubts or you have questions or concerns, you can always reach out to Prepshift for a second opinion. And we also have other contacts who can provide you with advice. So just wanted to give another quick example of some of the Mass Save rebates and incentives that are out there. As you can see here, for example, if you are buying a large gas fryer, you can get up to $1,500 back for buying an Energy Star or qualified model. Whoops. So what we typically recommend is working directly with whoever you're buying the equipment from. They should know about all the rebates that are available. If you are buying a piece of custom equipment or like a really big piece of equipment, in some cases, you do need to get approval in advance in order to receive your rebate. So that's something to keep in mind. And again, to talk to your equipment vendor about. And these rebates really range. Some of them are just a couple $100s. But for these more energy intensive items, such as broilers, combis, and fryers, these are hefty incentives. And again, in addition to these incentives, you do get the energy savings in an ongoing way. And so you're getting a little bit less of a bill up front, and then hopefully you are saving money in perpetuity with that efficient model. Now, I know that a lot of us like to not talk to our landlords if we can help it, but depending on the terms of your lease, your landlord may be responsible for certain aspects of the building that are wasting your money, such as your insulation, your windows, your storefront. It's always worth finding out if your landlord has any plans to work on the building, not just for energy efficiency purposes, but also because it could interrupt your business and you want to be in front of that. Landlords can access rebates and incentives, so they don't have to do it just out of the goodness of their heart. They can also get paid for it. And there may be ways for them to collaborate with you and potentially your co-tenants to lobby for improvements or even to cover costs together. A couple recommendations and examples here are painting roofs white instead of black. Black roofs absorb and radiate heat. And so there's a big kind of initiative happening all over the country to go to white or reflective roofs, as well as landscaping. Some landlords do spend a ton of money making sure that grass is green and those bushes look beautiful. But going to low water use plants, or even moving away from like a traditional lawn to something that doesn't require as much water and attention, that might be something your landlord would consider. And of course, we're going to talk about this a bunch of times today, but we think it's really important to get your team involved. What are they seeing in the restaurant? What are their concerns about climate change and energy efficiency? And especially as we are employing younger generations of people, typically, on average, they have a lot of concerns about climate change and what kind of world they are going to be living in. And so drawing from their enthusiasm, their anxieties, providing opportunities for them to become educated and to track their progress is super important. In many cases, if you are able to save money, you then have a little bit of cash to provide an incentive for your team. So if you can rally the team around energy use, for example, you can set a timeline for creating some incentives for everybody involved. On that same note, you really do want to make sure you're doing one thing at a time. I know that we all have so much on our minds. My mental post-it board is much more crowded than this, but deciding what key numbers you want to monitor, that's really important. Telling your team we want to use less energy, that is not a very actionable goal. It's not that measurable, and it might not even really mean that much to them. And so selecting your key numbers, monitoring your progress, and then if you are successful, be sure that you celebrate. These are all kind of elements of keeping your team involved. And I'm going to pause there just to see if anybody has any questions about our energy presentation.
There's no questions from the public yet, but I have one clarifying question, maybe, Irene. Can you talk a little bit more about induction? What is an induction? Is it just stovetop? Is it also an oven?
For sure. So induction cooking is a form of electric cooking, and it actually is, it uses magnets to directly heat your pot or pan. It does mean that you have to have a pot or pan that is ferrous. So something like stainless steel or cast iron, it won't work on an aluminum pan. But essentially, if you think about cooking with gas, gas is heating the air around your pot and heating the bottom of your pot. Induction is using electricity to actually heat just the pot itself. So if you turn on an induction burner and there's no pot sitting on top of it, no energy is being expended. But when you put the pot onto it, it is using magnetic force to heat the pot itself. And so it tends to be a lot more efficient in terms of energy usage. It is a little bit of an investment because it is a more sophisticated piece of technology. And if you're used to cooking with aluminum, you do have to move over to stainless steel. But in our experience, it is extremely useful. Those are also much easier cooktops to clean. They're just a solid surface, so you can wipe them down. And it just takes a little bit of practice. So if you're curious about induction, you might consider getting a single portable induction burner. And even though those aren't as high quality as something you might install right in your countertop, it can give you a sense of what cooking on induction is like. Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so let's move over to talking about another very important form of pollution in restaurants, which is packaging. I want to start by acknowledging that there are a lot of challenges when it comes to sustainable packaging. Does the product work for the guest? Is it functional? Is it usable? Does it work for your team? A lot of times, compostable products, they might melt, they might spill, they might be really hard to separate all the plates out of a stack. And so we always want to think about functionality. Above all else, the product has to work. There's also often some confusion about how these products are made. If they are compostable, did that mean it took a lot more energy to produce them? Are we sort of shooting ourselves in the foot when we think about the energy involved? There are also a lot of words and labels. These products can be expensive. And sometimes we buy recyclable or compostable products, and we know we're just hoping that they get recycled or composted. So if we don't know what really happens to them, is that still ultimately a benefit? These are all things that we deal with at Maymay and in many other businesses. And so we are going to try to kind of tease out some of these issues and questions so that, again, you can save money, your team has super functional products to work with, and your guest has a great experience. And just to remind everyone, even though there are all these challenges, customers are pretty overwhelmingly interested in paying more for sustainable packaging. They are more likely to purchase products that are in environmentally friendly materials. And essentially, because of attitudes on climate change, which are increasingly, interested in the health of our environment, we think that guests are attracted to restaurants that provide them with eco-friendly materials so that they can feel good about their buying choices. And there are a lot of different kinds of packaging out there. So we're going to start by talking about some of the different varieties. And I do want to preface by saying that these are broad strokes, and new products and types of packaging are coming on the market all the time. So this should be enough info to get you started, but it is not necessarily comprehensive, and it may not be up to date in perpetuity. So first, let's talk about Styrofoam. I think we all know that Styrofoam is kind of at the bottom of the barrel. It is not easily recycled. It is not good for human health and pollutes air and water. There are more than 130 municipal and state bans on Styrofoam in the United States. And Styrofoam takes hundreds of years to decompose, if ever. And so this is something that we can say with a fair amount of confidence that if you are currently using Styrofoam, you are going to have to make a change. Whether it is because of external pressure from guests, whether it's because of a ban, you are not in a stable position if most of what you're doing is Styrofoam. So where do we go from there? Many of us also use conventional plastic. One thing to keep in mind is that recycling only happens if there is a market for the end product. And in this case, today, only about 9% of plastic in the US is recycled. And so even though we put things in the recycling bin and we really hope that they do end up having a second life as another product, we don't always know if that's true. Plastic production is incredibly harmful to especially our oceans. I'm sure we've all seen the terrible pictures and videos of what happens to marine life. But plastic is incredibly bad for animals, including ourselves. Microplastics, when those plastics break down, they don't disappear. They just become tiny pieces of plastic. Those plastics can contaminate our food and water sources. And so the animals that are in the wild, including animals that we eat, are full of microplastics, and increasingly so are we. Plastic production contributes to climate change. It is an intensive process, and it does use petrochemicals. A lot of times folks ask about recycled plastic. It is a better process in terms of how it's made, but it can be expensive. And so you'll see why we are going to recommend moving beyond plastic entirely. And just like Styrofoam, plastic persists in the environment for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And so that means that our great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren will probably still live in a world that has our plastic straws and cups in it. The truth is, we don't really know yet how long it will take for many of today's products to degrade. So it's a little bit scary, but there are a lot of ways to move beyond this. You may be familiar with corn-based plastic. Sometimes these are based on other starches like potato or rice, but typically we see CPLA. And these are made from renewable resources. They require less energy to produce than conventional plastic, and they do biodegrade. But one thing to keep in mind is that many food waste pickup services and composting services do not accept them because they don't actually provide nutrients to the final product. And so that's something to watch out for. They also should not be recycled. They will often say on them that they are recyclable, but they actually can degrade the quality of the final recycled product. So if you want to buy, a recycled plastic playset for your kids, you may not want corn-based plastic as part of that because it does have a different structural makeup, and we've all seen these products melt in the sun or with hot food, and so we want to be careful about that. There also are a lot of compostable or a lot of products that are a bit greenwashed, meaning they seem like they're compostable, but how do we really know? And so we do recommend checking BPI as an external resource for over 17,000 recommended compostable products. But the BPI does say that often the marketing applied to these items is highly abusive, meaning that with enough jargon and enthusiasm, the consumer can easily be led to the wrong conclusion about a product. So what we really are excited about talking about is natural materials. And one thing to note is that natural does not always mean compostable, but it does mean that it is from a renewable resource, and it does mean that it breaks down and exits our environment faster than plastics. So these natural materials include bamboo, palm leaf, wood, and paper. And like we said, these are renewable. Often they can withstand high temperatures better than corn plastic, although they may not be as watertight. They're simpler and less energy intensive to manufacture. And like we said, they're not always compostable or recyclable. But even that being said, if they go into a landfill, they will degrade faster than styrofoam or plastic. So all of that is to say, there are a lot of factors that we have to consider when it comes to our disposables. And so we have up here styrofoam and plastic, which tend to be low cost and highly negative in terms of their impact. And then we have natural materials on the other end of the spectrum where the cost and function may not be ideal, but the environmental impact is much, much preferable. And so it's going to be up to you to decide where you want to be using these different products. And so we've sort of generalized, but we also want to note that you don't always have to use disposables. Reusable items will always be better in terms of both cost and impact than these disposable items. I want to just pause for any questions about types of packaging. I know we covered a lot of material, and this is just a little summary of it.
We did cover a lot of material. That was incredible. Thank you, Irene. We don't have any questions at the moment, but I would not be surprised if some come up eventually. So for the moment, we're good.
All right. Thank you. So let's talk about, now that we've been overwhelmed by information, how do we make decisions and move forward? So we have a couple of steps that we want to lay out when it comes to greener packaging. The first thing is you don't always need packaging. So can we eliminate the places where we're using packaging? The second thing is improving the packaging that you absolutely do need. You can't do takeout without a certain degree of disposables. And so how do we improve what we have to use? Number 3 is how do we train our team and our guests to be aligned with what we're doing in terms of our packaging? And then, of course, we have to brag about what we've accomplished because this is not easy. It requires your time and energy. And so we want to make sure that you, as the restaurant owner, get credit for all the incredible things and changes that you've made. So let's talk quickly about eliminating packaging. The number one thing here is switching to reusables. And I know that you cannot always have a reusable item for your guest, but if you're using disposables even for guests who dine in, that might be something to consider because a plate you buy once and you can feed a lot of guests with it. So over time, in many cases, a reusable option, even though you're washing it, even though you might have some breakage, you will come out on top in terms of cost. Eliminating unnecessary items, I think in many cases, we err on the side of providing extra things like extra napkins, extra utensils, but those are not always used. And I think I'm probably not alone in having a drawer full of chopsticks, disposable chopsticks, for example. And so one thing we can do is ask our guests to opt in to reduce. So one example would be not every guest wants or needs a straw. And so we would consider whether there are ways to address that by giving the guest more opportunity. So a couple of examples and tips here. Switching to reusable dishware, again, we would often recommend that you start with just water cups. If your water cups in your restaurant are plastic, these are an easy way to get started with reusables. Water cups typically are pretty easy to clean. You can use an under-counter dishwasher, which is less intensive than a full dish setup. And you can, see how it goes, essentially, to introduce more reusables. Using more flexible packaging so that you don't have as many different kinds of packaging. Some restaurants use a lot of different types and sizes of disposables, like 3 sizes of cups with 3 sizes of lids. It may be worth kind of taking a look at what you're doing with disposables and figuring out if you can either reduce the number of sizes, cut down on the unnecessary elements, and see if you can also make your life easier, because often we end up running to the store for last minute items because we can't find that specific 5-ounce ramekin lid that we know we need. Like we said, again, charging for takeout utensils and napkins. This is easy to do if you have online ordering, and there are platforms like Grubhub that have an option for this. Some folks have also noted that even when you say you don't want utensils, sometimes you get them anyway. So we do also suggest that if you are just a consumer and you have a pile of utensils at home that are packaged, those can be donated to a soup kitchen or to a community fridge, so that someone who needs them can ultimately use them and you don't just throw them in the trash. Finally, you can offer bring your own discounts for mugs or even takeout containers. There are sometimes health concerns around this. Like, what if somebody brings you a kind of gross mug and they want you to make their coffee in it? And so there are resources, including the Product Stewardship Institute, who can help you think through some of these processes. And then, yeah, we always love recommending that we start with straws. There are a lot of alternative options to plastic straws. Some people use pasta, like a hollow bucatini. Some people have paper straws, some people use metal straws. And it's worth keeping in mind that you can implement multiple solutions. You don't have to switch entirely away from plastic straws. There are some guests who may have a disability that means that they can only drink through a plastic straw. And so really playing around with this, and it's relatively inexpensive to check out these alternative options and see how they stack up. There are a lot of companies that make lids for sipping rather than for straws. You can still put a straw in that cup if you want, but cold cups with sip lids, I think, are a great option for a lot of different kinds of drinks. You can make straws available by request only. And what we did at May was we actually sold metal straws at a pretty significant profit. And so if a guest wanted to avoid using a plastic straw, they had an option to buy a metal straw for, I think it was $1. And they were able to take that away with them, feel good about their choice. And then that profit is obviously very small, but still helpful to the business. Any questions about how we eliminate the kind of unnecessary aspects of packaging?
No questions yet, but I have to say, my mind is blown by the idea of a pasta straw.
Oh my gosh, me too. I love the pasta straw. They do get a little soft. Paper straws, are tough as well. And so for me personally, that's why my favorite solution is the sip lid. But again, like you can implement multiple of these to see what really sticks and what resonates with your customers. Great. So let's go on to talking about you can't always get rid of all the packaging. And so how do we take steps to improve it? The number one thing that we recommend in all cases, not just with packaging, is that you want to comparison shop. When you can buy online, you can look at all different options that are out there. And I know that a lot of small restaurants, mostly go to Restaurant Depot or BMS paper. And in those cases, you don't get presented with a lot of options. Whatever compostable fork they have is probably what they have. And so the price you get is the price you're stuck with, and that can really limit you and make things more expensive than they need to be. At Maymay, we use Webstaurant Store for most things, and we have a membership that costs $99 a month for Webstaurant Plus, and that provides free shipping. And so that is kind of how we ensure that we're getting the best price and that we also get to browse the variety because we know there is so much variety out there. All right, so back to how we improve packaging. The very first thing is that we want to get rid of styrofoam. You're going to have to do this sooner or later. And so making sure that you have a plan for this is very important. The easiest and cheapest way to do this is just to switch to plastic and paper goods. You don't have to go all the way to compostable, renewable products. And we're going to talk a little bit more about plastics in just a moment. But we did want to just do a little quiz, and you can keep score for yourself. Just because something is plastic or paper does not mean you can recycle it, right? So, of these items, which are recyclable in the state of Massachusetts? And maybe what we should even say is, which should you recycle? And if you came up with none of these, you are correct. I think I am definitely guilty of putting some of all of these things in the recycling because in my mind, I'm just thinking to myself, oh, it's paper. That means it's recyclable. Or, oh, it's plastic. That means it's recyclable. And the reality is that for a variety of reasons, these products are not desirable for recyclers and shouldn't be recycled. For these cartons, typically the main reason is that there's not a market for the product that comes out of the recycling process. You can definitely check with your local city or state, depending on where you're located. But the market for recycled paper that is coated in this way is fairly minimal. And so this is something that you may wish to avoid, even though those cartons of like water are very attractive and trendy right now. A can may suit you better from an environmental perspective. These black plastic takeout containers we'll talk about more in a minute, but plastic bags and plastic utensils, despite being plastic, are not really good for the machines that sort and package recycling for production. And so these items, they fall through the cracks, they get stuck in the works. And so most recycling facilities do not want these items in your recycling bin. So going back to these takeout containers, which I have a collection of about 3 dozen of in my home right now, not all plastic is created equal, and you should make sure that your plastic is recyclable where you are. These containers, the lids are typically recyclable and will get recycled, but the plastic black bottoms are not, because most recycling facilities use like infrared lasers to detect items on a conveyor belt. And these black plastic bottoms, even though they say they are recyclable, do not work with the current recycling technology that we have. And so this is something to keep in mind, not just in your restaurant, but when you are a consumer, that these products, even if you do send them to a recycling plant, they may or may not end up getting recycled. And one other thing to note, as we did before, is that recycled plastic is more expensive, but less energy intensive to make. So a recycled plastic product may be right for your restaurant, but keeping in mind that the cost can be prohibitive, super important. We also advise being cautious with compostables. And this may sound crazy coming from someone who is as gung-ho about sustainability as I am, but corn and other kinds of plastics, you are definitely going to pay a premium for, and your composter, your food waste pickup, may or may not actually want it. So be sure that your compost service will accept what you are composting. And we recommend opting for natural materials, even if you don't compost. So using wooden forks instead of plastic, even if those don't go out to some picturesque compost pile on a farm, if they're in the landfill, they will degrade much, much faster than a plastic utensil. So let's talk a little bit about this. How we switch from styrofoam or plastic to paper and save some money. We have 2 cup options here. And as you can see, whoa, the compostable option is more than 3 times the price. But we can also add in 2 paper options. And one of them, the one on the right, is officially compostable, and the one on the left is not. But they are much closer in price to the styrofoam, and one of them is actually cheaper. And so in a lot of ways, I kind of think it's funny that, like, I always forget that paper cups and paper plates, which we've kind of had the longest, are often the best choice from a budget perspective and from an environmental perspective. Another great example is utensils. As you can see, these officially compostable eco-choice heavyweight forks are a fair price, relatively speaking. It is much more expensive than a plain plastic fork. And we have 2 different options for wooden utensils. One is slightly more expensive, and one is slightly less expensive. So this is the kind of comparison shopping that you can do when you're online. You can't do it when you're at Restaurant Depot. You can't do it at Costco. And so being able to comparison shop like this, I think, is really important. And when you find a product that you like, you can stick with it. So going back to those plastic takeout containers, we do recommend thinking about clamshells, plastic clamshells, or biopacks, which are these coated paper containers, instead of those plastic top and bottom containers. You can ask for samples from distributors. So you can test these things out with your particular dishes. Maybe you make curry or stew or something that is very saucy, and you want to see how it does in these biopacks. They will often send you samples for free. And again, these are not certified compostable, and typically they are not recyclable, but they're renewable, and they will break down in your landfill ultimately. So what we kind of want to ask is, where are you on the packaging improvement journey? We've already covered why we want to get away from styrofoam as soon as possible. And likely, the easiest thing is going to be to move towards plastic. But when we think about improving packaging, there are ways to upgrade from plastic. So natural materials, recycled plastic, and even those corn plastics. And then finally, we want to make sure that you're kind of continuously reevaluating what you are using. Maybe you've changed your menu, you've cut different items, maybe there are new products available out there that you should be thinking about. And so gradually, we are hoping to keep moving people primarily towards natural materials and recycled plastic. And so that continuous reevaluation is the way that we get there. And even asking your peers, like, what products work for you? Whenever I order takeout, I'm always like lifting up the container to see what the brand is on the bottom. And so that's part of reevaluation too. It doesn't always mean sitting at a computer doing online research, but getting out there and keeping your eyes open. And I think the key takeaway here is that any progress away from styrofoam is good progress. So you don't have to go from styrofoam straight to compostables. You can take steps along the way and make those incremental improvements. Any questions about packaging improvement?
No questions yet, but I will admit I did not know that companies would send little samples to let you test out some of their product. That is great information. I'm sure for some business owners, it can seem intimidating to potentially buy a sizable amount of packaging materials that ultimately might not work for the food you're trying to transport.
Absolutely. I think every restaurant probably has a disposables graveyard somewhere where you bought it and it was the wrong thing or the wrong size or it didn't work. And so, yeah, getting those samples can be really great. So our next step is going to be talking just kind of briefly about training your team and making sure that these changes you make go over the way you want them to. We always say that employee buy-in comes first. As you can see, this guy on the left, he's not so bought in. And so we want to make sure that we are collecting their feedback and understanding what their ideas are. At the end of the day, your employees want to be proud to work in your business. And so engaging them in making those decisions can make a big difference. At Maymay, the idea to sell metal straws was suggested by a team member. And we implemented that in conjunction with a number of other solutions. And I was very proud of how that ultimately worked out. Things to cover in training, because a lot of your employees are not engaged necessarily in energy usage, we do make sure that we are covering signage around waste and giving them information for things that are guest facing, like packaging. If you're expecting your team to bus tables and sort people's trays, they have to know where everything belongs, and providing that information in their language, super important. They have to set examples for the guests and also explain changes in a way that is positive and kind. We always say at Maymay that guest-facing employees are advocates. They are not advocates for the business, or they are advocates for the business, but perhaps more importantly, they are advocates for the guest. They are on the same team. And green improvements can sometimes feel like restrictions or punishments. And that's why this advocacy mindset is really important. So for example, if a guest says, oh, I really liked those styrofoam containers better because they kept my soup really hot. An employee could say, well, styrofoam's bad for the environment. Or they could say, thank you so much for the feedback. We're really excited about these changes because they're more sustainable, but we will let the team know what you said, and we'll keep thinking about how to make sure our soup is exactly as hot as it should be. So not just receiving this feedback, but also collecting it and taking their suggestions into account. That builds trust and brand loyalty with your guests as well. And then again, just going back to make sure you brag about your efforts. You worked hard to make a green choice, and so your guests should know, and it does make a difference in how they perceive your business. You can use signage and stickers. You can utilize your website, social media. You can even put flyers, in your bags, like, why don't we use styrofoam anymore? And kind of making sure that you meet the guest in that moment when they're opening up their takeout bag. That can be valuable. And you can even reach out to press to tell a unique story. So if you have made a real kind of radical change, or maybe you're using a brand new product, that's an opportunity to get yourself out there and to really talk about who you are, why you've made the choices you've made, and what guests should be thinking about and asking for. So these are kind of the steps, in our opinion, about how to communicate a story about a green change. Number one is just putting the information out there. Here's the change we've made. Number two is saying why, and not just why in a macro sense, but why is it important to you? Why is it important to you as the owner? Why is it important to your team? And finally, reporting the results is something that makes guests feel really good about supporting their business. And this goes for staff too, of course. But seeing that they are part of something bigger, that they are making a difference by continuing to come to your restaurant, I think that's a really big deal. Another way to tell your story is with a certification. So two popular certifications are the Green Restaurant Association and the Sustainable Business Leader Program, which is part of the Sustainable Business Network of Massachusetts, and they are actually based in Cambridge. As we know, certifications and labels aren't always as meaningful as they seem. So what we always recommend is, get more information about the process. And if you think it is legit, then we support moving forward with it. Ideally, these processes would also come with resources and support. So not just, oh, do you check these boxes? But also, if you don't check these boxes, how do we move you in that direction? And Maymay is a sustainable business leader via the Sustainable Business Network of Massachusetts. And I have nothing but great things to say about Lori and the team over there. They really do understand how critical it is to have incremental progress and give great recommendations about how to move things forward. All right. So that brings us to a little bit of a wrap up, just to kind of summarize the takeaways. Energy efficiency and plastic reduction are good for your bottom line and for the environment. This is, I think, the most important thing. That these choices that are often cast as altruistic are also good business sense. There are a lot of resources, There are a lot of resources available at the city and state level, as well as independent organizations who want to bring us all towards this better, more sustainable future. Pollution reduction is about smart purchasing and smart habits. So unfortunately, you can't just pick out the best thing from a catalog and then wash your hands of it. You do need to continue to maintain your best practices and your staff training. And this is something that we talk about a lot at Prepshift. How do you create a system that can sustain itself, that doesn't require you as the owner to individually kind of police or constantly remind people about how to sort the waste or how to turn off the fryer at the right time. And so these systems and this sense of kind of employee ownership, all of that goes back to why you need your team on board. So starting with your team, getting their opinions, their suggestions, their feedback is in many ways kind of a first step. So we would love to hear if anyone is thinking about something that they learned that they thought was pretty memorable, if they have an idea about what they might do first, and any final questions or concerns. And I can go first just to break the ice a little bit. I was so heartbroken when I found out that those black plastic takeout containers were not truly recyclable or getting recycled. And so I have, as I said, a big collection here in my kitchen that I am slowly working through, gifting leftovers and storing other things other than food in them. And one thing we're in the middle of at Maymay is eliminating plastic cups in the dining room. Because we opened in January, we didn't have a ton of cash because we were paying for our build out. And so doing those kinds of improvements where you make a big upfront investment and you recognize the benefit over time, that was a little bit less appealing to us. And so we do have plastic cups for water in the restaurant, but we are just about to pull the trigger on some new items, which I am very excited about. And much to the delight of our dishwashers, we are not going to necessarily move to too much other reusables, but we use the most plastic cups, and they are easily replaced by something that can go through the dishwasher, the dish machine, very easily. So we're very excited about that.
Irene, I will admit, I also died a little bit when I learned about the black bottom container of those takeout duos.
It's
That
tough.
was a memorable moment.
Yeah.
We
Great.
don't any other questions that have come up or anything yet. So I think there's a lot of great information here.
Amazing. Well, one other thing we do want to reiterate is that we are able, in partnership with the City of Cambridge, to offer some one-on-one support to attendees of this workshop series who are within certain areas of Cambridge. So we would love to have you reach out to us if you are thinking that you'd like to sit down and kind of talk through some of these items, maybe make an action plan about how you want to implement in your own business. You can reach out to us or to Christina and her colleagues, and we would love to help kind of take this information and make it actionable for you. So best way to get in touch with us is our email address right here. And we do have a feedback survey. So you can pick up your phone, open up your camera, and scan this QR code for our 3-minute survey, or you can type in the URL below. And we're so happy that you were able to attend. We know that your time is valuable, and we really do believe that these are things that will save money for your business. So we can't wait to hear from you and figure out how we can help you be more sustainable and be more profitable and enjoy all the benefits of both of those things.
Irene, thank you. Thank you so very much. This was an incredible presentation. It's obviously an important topic. It's a really timely topic. I know for us who are here in New England, we all had orange skies yesterday from the wildfires in Nova Scotia. So I think there are more and more instances where there is just a very palpable sense of urgency about this topic. And there's a lot that all of us can be doing to kind of do our own part. And I think today was a great step for being able to give business owners a chance to learn all the different aspects of how to take some first steps, how to figure out some things that are going on with compostables versus recyclables, how to engage the team. I think that really stood out for me because having a team that's engaged and excited to celebrate those wins with you is just an enormous asset. We were very grateful to see all of the energy efficiency programs that you shared in your presentation that are offered by the City of Cambridge. Thank you for putting that in. I would be remiss if I didn't mention a couple of additional programs that our division happens to offer that are related to this topic. My colleague runs a program called the Small Business Enhancement Program, and it allows business owners to make purchases of equipment. So if people are interested in new HVAC systems, if people are interested in some of those Energy Star steamers, if people are interested in those induction cooktop burners, we have a program that can help you buy those. Additionally, we also have a program that is called the Storefront Improvement Program that allows business owners or property owners of commercial places to make improvements to the front of the building. So new windows that can be more energy efficient, installing awnings to kind of help with some of that sun that comes in. So lots of reasons to reach out and lots of reasons to stay in touch. I want to thank you again so very much, Irene, for all this great information and for your expertise.
My pleasure, Christina. Thank you. And we look forward to keeping in touch with everyone.
Likewise. Take care. Have a good day.
All right. Bye-bye.